and welcome to another episode of Schiffbauer Over Rocks. I'm very fortunate to have Mayor Michael Helfrich at the only bar you can sit at York right now, believe it or not. It's an absolute pleasure to have you tonight, sir.
Wait a minute. Is this a violation? I didn't know I was getting into
I
this.
don't know. We might have to talk to Governor Wolf with the court orders, but hey, I'm not going to tell anybody.
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, good.
Good. An absolute pleasure to have you more than anything. But with that being said, tell us more about you. For those who might not be from the York area tuning in tonight.
Well, I'm a guy from the York area. My mom, or my dad's from Girard Avenue here in York City.
Okay.
And my mom is from Frankfurt, Germany. So
Okay. I have a very German last name.
He met her. Yep, me too. Helfrich.
Oh, yeah. Schiffbauer.
Schiffbauer. You're a shipbuilder.
I am, but yeah, that is a direct correlation. I do not know your translation, though.
It means helper.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually very ironic with what you do.
Yeah.
Your mission.
Apropos. Mm-hmm. My parents had moved out of the city right before I was born over to West York. So I grew up in West York. When I was young, my mom would and my parents would take us back to Germany every once in a while. So I got kind of a broad view of the world, I like to think. Was traveling around and going to museums in France and some of my favorite stuff, going to the old Roman ruins and the old temples in Germany. So that and the fact that I grew up during the bicentennial.
It had to be awesome.
In 1976, 77, 78, those things really instilled a love of history that I have. And so that's where I come from. I, again, graduated from West York. I went to college for a little bit, but I was more of a traveler, experienced learner.
A little wanderlust at one point?
Well, quite a bit. I spent 11 years basically being a traveler and coming back to York, so spending a little bit of time here and there, living in the woods in Glacier Park while I worked at the lodge, living in Boulder, Colorado on couches while I delivered the Denver Post and worked at a slingshot factory and a restaurant and on the streets of New Orleans and just kind of did that thing in my 20s where I experienced many different places and cultures, lived on 2 different Native American reservations.
Interesting.
And so I got to know a lot about people, and particularly also not just the cultural diversity, but the class diversity, living virtually as a homeless person in New Orleans and San Francisco and some other places, but then also had a job that brought me in contact with Ethel Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. was the president of the Waterkeeper Alliance, so I got to have just a few conversations. Don't want to make it out like we're good friends or anything.
But hey,
but it's something, and it has an impact. So I like to say that I have I've eaten out of dumpsters with homeless people in New Orleans, and I've had dinner with the Kennedys. so I run this gamut.
I love the duality.
I run this gamut of experience. I've been a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, and I've hauled trash out of the Cadorus Creek. I have kind of a mantra: nobody is better than me, and nobody is worse than me. Mm-hmm. And that comes from the fact that I've been able to hang out with different people and respect them on the level that they're at.
And that being said, I mean, that's a very unique background, and some people, regardless of their 20s or not, will ever experience that kind of like dynamic range of experiences. How do you feel like that has, I mean, other than just viewing people as equals, shaped you and ultimately who you are now?
Well, to progress a little bit kind of chronologically, out of my 20s, my father passed away, and that's when I felt like the rest of my life, I had one of those kind of rock and roll kind of feelings when I was a kid, like I'm not going to live past my 20s. That's kind of a feeling that I had when I was
living in the moment.
When I was young. And then I hit 30, and my father passed away, And I said, wow, maybe you're here for a purpose. And so I went out and tried to find my purpose in different parts of the country, ended up being drawn back here by some friends who said, hey, Bobby Kennedy Jr. just spoke about this river keeper stuff, and we want you to come back and be the Cadorus Creek keeper.
Okay.
And because I had thrown some festivals and done some protesting about how we in our community and the businesses in our community and our county have treated the Cadorus Creek. And so I was having a little bit of a rough experience on the Navajo reservation where I was trying to be of assistance, but at the same time I was still a symbol of the things that had been done to Native Americans. I was what they call in the Dene language a Belagana, a white person, a white.
Yeah.
Not a positive comment, more of a derogatory comment. So even though I was trying to help, I was an invader. I was
You're an outsider.
I was an outsider.
You didn't belong necessarily.
Right. And I had this again, my interest in history. I knew already that the forefathers of the biggest polluter of the Cadorus, Gladfelder Paper Company, were buried in the same cemetery in Seven Valleys, right by my ancestors who came here in the 1750s.
Okay.
So I had roots. I had ownership. I felt like I had every right to a clean creek, that they felt they had the right to use it to make money.
Yeah, for their own usage.
For their own. And I don't... I don't judge them for being industrialists and giving thousands of people jobs.
They were opportunists at the time.
over the years, but at the same time, the communities all downstream have suffered and continue to suffer for the externalization of that pollution onto the people.
That was the effect of what they caused, essentially.
Yes.
Where you have a lot of pros, but you also had a lot of cons.
Yeah. So, I still have it that I want that creek cleaner, that it would be an incredible amenity to our community if it was like some of the streams and creeks that I've seen going through places that I've lived, like Boulder, Colorado, or like Eugene, Oregon, or some of these places where the waterway does not detract the way that it has here for 156 years.
In that regard. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
That's really fascinating. Kind of going off that more than anything. Do you ever envision, I know you said you had this moment when you're around 30. You're big on service. You've really kind of already shared that here tonight. But with that, do you ever envision yourself in a career in politics growing up?
Probably not, since I played George Washington in the kindergarten play for the bicentennial.
Okay.
I had no idea that this direction was coming. So to continue again chronologically, I came back to York and got involved and helped create the Cadorus Creek Improvement Partnership. From that, started with the lobbying on Capitol Hill and doing stuff like that, then became the Lower Susquehanna River Keeper. More lobbying, more activity at City Council. I think it was 2002 and 2003 when I got involved in removing the piles of incinerator ash that were over on the northwest side of York City at the quarry. And through that effort, that ash was blowing into the neighborhoods. And it's incinerator ash. We weren't allowed to call it toxic, but you could call it toxin-laden.
It's funny how that works out.
It had the toxins in it, and it was blowing into our community near an elementary school. So I got involved in politics that way as an activist. And that's how I got to know the council members. That's how I started going to council meetings, and then I started speaking up on other things on the agenda, just because I'm inquisitive and have opinions. So I started speaking at the council meetings Then when one of my friends who also played a major role in the 70s of and in the early 2000s of drawing attention to the Codorus Creek,
Okay.
Council President Genevieve Ray, when she was stepping down, she and some of the other council members and other individuals asked me to run. And even though there were severe barriers that I knew about, I told folks about those barriers, and they still supported me.
That's really telling. They believed in you in that regard. Yep. So, I mean, with that, it's just an opportunity presents itself. You took it. How have you taken opportunities kind of since then?
Well, I think my entire political career has been taking opportunities. That first time that I ran for council, I actually was defeated in the Democratic primary in a city that is 65% Democratic. I was defeated, but I ran a write-in campaign.
I read a little bit about that, which is very fascinating.
And this was the 2000. Actually, I've done it twice. This was in 2011, and I ran a write-in campaign that I won by 3 votes.
That's insane.
I beat a 16-year incumbent.
That's insane.
With 3 votes. So don't ever believe, as the election comes up, don't ever believe that your vote doesn't count.
And I think we're tentatively going to release this right around election time, too.
Oh, okay.
So that's perfect.
Don't believe that your vote doesn't count, because you're looking at a guy who not only won by 3 votes, but wasn't even on the ballot when I won by 3 votes. Every individual had to learn how to spell my name, and there were even little campaign songs that were written so that to make sure that people knew how to spell my name. Yeah, some of my friends, Pete and Lindsay, and they came up with little jingles and stuff and kind of sang them around town.
Well, jingles, it's really fascinating. I mean, I'm parlaying a little bit, just being from the marketing space and the marketing world. I mean, jingles for the past several decades, from an advertising standpoint, you say it enough, catches a tune, remember it. Then all of a sudden, when you hear something that triggers it, it's like, boom, gotta vote for Mike.
Yep. Yeah, it was just a little thing, Helfrich, and then that's it. And they would, and my friend Ron Benway, another artist here that comes to York, calls it one of his homes around the country. They just went around, and wherever they were playing, they repeated that to make sure that people knew how to spell my name to do the write-in.
I found it really fascinating. Believe it or not, and this is our first time us formally meeting, which is awesome more than anything. We've seen each other in passing public events. Mm-hmm. But with that, believe it or not, I, growing up, really wanted to pursue a career in politics. I almost went to a major university for poli-sci. And then I was a senior in high school. I just had to pivot. I'm just going to go to school business. But through my experiences, I really kind of parlayed in those I've heard in the field, where a lot of political strategy is parlayed into strategy in general with business. Mm-hmm. So
it's all the same. Yeah. I mean, a business is a brand. A politician is a brand. It's all the same.
It's refreshing to hear that from a politician himself.
I don't call myself a politician, but
I wouldn't really fancy you a traditional politician.
I'm a public servant. I was
about to say a man of the people.
I don't have any interest in. I don't have any interest in politics, as in using political parties against each other, or being stuck in a rut because you're a D or an R. Or a C or a G or whatever you might be. So I'm a public servant. I'm here to serve York. I have no ambitions after serving York.
Really?
Yeah. This is
it.
This is it.
The last stop.
This is the last stop.
Well, that's fulfilling in some degree.
What's that?
That's fulfilling in some degree, where it's just serving York in that regard, and then whatever the next chapter may be.
Yes. Yeah. I've already limited myself to the amount of years that I might spend doing this, and as a young man who seems to keep getting older, at least externally, at least chronologically, life is short, and
It is.
and there's a lot to do in this world. And as I've already explained, I did a lot when I was young, and now I am serving my community in my world. But I I'm a little antsy to go out and explore some more of the world that I didn't see as a young person.
I think there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with
No,
that.
yeah, I
Either.
think you're fully entitled to that, quite frankly.
My mom was funny when I don't know how old she was when she started to travel. I'm gonna say probably about 60. She started traveling, and she said to me, "Oh, now I understand what you were doing."
Mm-hmm.
Just the experiences, the incredible. Now, she was doing it with a little more money than I had when I was doing it. I was roughing it a little bit more. But, if you're not, I don't believe you're here on this earth to work your life away and die.
I agree with you in that sentiment. That's why
there's-
I believe in. I'm very fortunate to work for myself, be autonomous in that degree. I feel like I serve the community from a standpoint where I'm serving small business owners in the communities they support, the customer bases they support. Slightly different mission than from public service, but I mean, with that, it's great to know that you're benefiting something bigger than you.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's just having that autonomy. I feel like it's really important and to explore the world
Yeah.
because we're only here for so long.
Well, I always had the activism strain going through me since I was 19 and 20, protesting down in D.C. Against the first Iraq War, which I thought was,
It's a little before my time.
yeah. Well, that first Iraq War, that in my mind, and then and today, it was a political war that was sending people of color over to fight for something that they had very little to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's how the military
Military-industrial complex.
often, yeah. And so I was opposed to that very early on, and then I was volunteering. I did other things throughout, raising money for the Access Shelter here in York, working on the Navajo reservation, and trying to make sure that the individuals were getting legal representation for things that the federal government and corporations, particularly the coal companies, were doing to them. So there was always this thread of activism, of work that was going through a life that was kind of based around enjoyment and entertainment.
Well, I don't think there's nothing necessarily wrong with that at all, but it's just you have that purpose that always seems to kind of creep out. The various chapters of your life that you kind of presented thus far. It's always there. You're always of service. You always are there to advocate for somebody or some group. And I think we all, regardless of what causes we may be about, I feel like it's for every individual, personally, professionally, have something that you stand for that may be bigger than you.
Yeah, you're missing a part of life if you're only about you.
No, it's you got to look at the lens.
Yeah.
What's out there other than just my life, day to day?
Yeah, and I mean, the whole progression of the human race appears to be, I think if you're on a certain side of it, the slow and painful progression of improving the living conditions for everyone and the respect we have for everyone. That is a goal of mine, and I think that's really the purpose, the broader purpose of life, is to make it better for everybody.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely can agree with that. I mean, kind of parlaying with your experience as the mayor of York and this working within the city government, we have a very diverse community. How do you feel like you've been able to parlay that thus far in your public service work?
I think my biggest thing is what I said before, is that nobody is better than me and nobody is worse than me, and I want to make things better for everybody. So I'm going to say something really risky, because Jane Elliott last night inspired me tonight to say it. Jane Elliott, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. Okay, so Jane Elliott, who in 1968 created the blue eye, brown eye experiment for her kids in third grade to try to explain how ridiculous using melanin or using any kind of color to compare people's humanity, how absurd such a thing is. And so for a day she said all the blue-eyed kids are lesser than and all the brown-eyed kids are greater than. And then a day later she switched them. And those kids in that short amount of time, 24 hours, 48 hours, understood not only how preposterous the idea is that you could judge somebody by their skin color or their eye color or whatever, but also how it felt so bad that they didn't want to be the one in power either, because they had experienced in just a short period of time how horrible it felt to be the oppressed. And I think just... Oh, and so the risky thing I was going to say is that I truly believe, again, being a historian, being an amateur archaeologist, that we're all Africans. We're all Africans.
That's relevant.
You
I mean,
know?
we all came from the
We
motherland.
all came from Africa. So everything else was just a reaction to the amount of sun that we got over hundreds of thousands of years.
Geography
You know?
and political divide and conquer.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, and it's all been an arbitrary, everything after the first 300,000 years has been an arbitrary power play from the groups that made up this idea that one was lesser than the other. And, you know, it's divide and conquer. I mean, it's
Position of power, then that's how, unfortunately, historically, that has panned out.
Yeah.
From a historical context and a societal context over hundreds and thousands of years. I take it from the standpoint, people can knock college education. I'm very fortunate for the college education I had at York College of Pennsylvania. Great institute.
I'm a York College dropout.
Oh, hey, I'll cheers to that.
All right. I'll still get my degree sometime York College, but I actually started going to York College when I was 13 years old.
Really?
Yes.
And we'll get back to that, but no, I want to hear a little more about this.
I started going to York
You're a little
College
savant.
when I was 13 years old, and I still don't even have an associate's degree. I kept going back, taking a couple classes, running back out on the road halfway through the semester.
Okay.
You know, whatever. But yeah, I'm one of the youngest students and one of the oldest that does not even have an associate's degree for the amount of time that I spent at York College. So.
I think it's just great in general just to take classes and learn more, be enlightened more. Business major.
I didn't mean to digress there, but you were saying you loved
It was a
your
great
experience.
digression.
You loved your experience at York College.
So business major, but you know, of course, you have to take your various electives and the liberal arts degrees or liberal arts courses. Which some it's just like you can debate like, oh, why I got to take this? But like I had a intro to the Middle East course, phenomenal experience. Professor was from Lebanon. Very enlightening experience about the overall history about the Middle East in general. Then it's just how, you know, kind of come back for the whole, we're all from Africa standpoint. Really, I mean, Europeans essentially grew from a civilization standpoint just because of the geography primarily, more than anything.
Well, Europeans grew as a civilization because Middle Easterners and Northern Africans provided them with a lot of technology and a lot of knowledge. I mean, going back to the alphabet, mathematics, all of that. Very little of that came from the Northern European. And trust me.
Oh, no, nothing was there prior.
You know, well, never say nothing because everybody had their own. The fact that they made it there and survived and created incredible art, incredible tools on their own that aren't found other places. That's the thing, is that the whole comparison game gets silly.
Over time, when you
look at it, I mean, I did do it there for a second, just because, the value of the knowledge that came out of Asia, that came out of the Middle East, that came out of Africa, just jettisoned the European culture of the Renaissance.
Yes, that was my point. It's just they took that and then they also had more of a geographic advantage, more greenery, able to like this farm more natural resources than those in the more Arab terrain areas.
I can see part of
From
that.
a very
Yes,
broad
yes,
standpoint,
yes.
top line
Yeah,
standpoint.
it's like the hills of Pennsylvania versus Arizona.
Correct. That's exactly the point I was
Yeah,
making.
yeah.
Very top line,
Yep.
without getting into specifics. Where it's just, but we all come from the same source, though.
Yep.
Where that group may have ascended because of X, Y, Z reasons.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're all the same people.
So to bring it back around to your question,
Exactly. We're digressing a little bit, but it's a good digression.
It is. It's really my goal. The reason I ran to be mayor is that if we can help the people, the families who are predominantly now of darker skin in the city of York, that is how we fix York for the long haul.
Correct.
You know, making sure that we build up businesses in the neighborhoods, making sure that are going to hire their family and neighbors, building up people that aren't getting access to resources that other people are getting, and just simply and addressing the trauma that is that people are subjected to in most cases through no fault of their own. You know, that's when we start really changing a city. And that's when people understand the greater value of themselves. That's when people stop shooting each other over things that many of us would find ridiculous.
Trivial.
So that's why I'm doing this. It's not the most fun thing I've ever done. I'll tell you that.
Well, I can imagine. But it's bigger than you. Someone outside looking in, it is bigger than you. You are doing something that is bigger than Michael Helfrich.
Yeah. And to be honest, I ran because the vision that I see that could happen wasn't happening or wasn't happening fast enough for me. And so that's when I decided to run for mayor.
Excellent. No, I mean, wow. That's a lot to pack in, more than anything. I'm going to take a swig. We'll get back to that. I would love to hear more about your history background because I hear you're very passionate about that.
I guess it goes back to, as I said, I'm a bicentennial kid. So there was a lot of passion in the community when I was, and I'm also a political kid. So my mom and dad helped start the Teen Dems.
Really?
The York County Teen Dems. And my dad worked for Jimmy Carter's campaign, and that was my first political gig. Is that at 6 years old I worked the polls and handed out the little flyers for Jimmy Carter and the little shellacked peanuts on a necklace.
That was his thing.
That was yep. But so the combination of that kind of political stuff and then and the bicentennial and my mom taking me to the historical society in any spare and cemeteries in any spare time that we had to put together our genealogy. So I spent a lot of time flipping through. Back then, no computers, nothing like that. You know,
No, it's old school.
Flipping through the little.
It's not 23andMe.
Flipping through the index cards and taking the pencil and crayon imprints of the eroded tombstones to see if you could get any information. You know, little detective work. As a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old detective.
Well, the archaeologist in you mentioned.
Detective. What's that?
The archaeologist in you mentioned.
Yeah. And then as when I was 9 and in Germany, my parents took me to a paleontology site where they had all these big piles of slate that were the scraps from the dinosaurs that they were excavating, the dinosaurs and the aquatic dinosaurs that they were excavating, and you could go and just mess with that stuff. And I brought home all sorts like fish and snails and all sorts of cool fossils that got me interested in that. So I've got the archaeology and paleontology side. I've got the American and European history side from my family, and got into the Civil War because I was able to trace a couple of my ancestors.
Okay.
That were one of which died during the died in action during the Civil War. Another one who was a POW during the Civil War. So that got me very into that. And then about 11 years ago, I bought this house. That is the house that Thomas Paine stayed in for a few months while he was in York. At least that is the local passed down local tradition. I'm still working to prove that. I've got about 100 pages of a book that I've put together on just that topic
phenomenal.
Of Thomas Paine's time in York and the different families that encountered Thomas Paine or would have encountered him.
He's one of the most important people in our nation.
One of the most, and one of the most disparaged of all times. So
he gets a lot of flack, but...
Well, when you tell all rich people, all political figures, and all religious figures that none of them should have any power, yeah, you kind of get shot down. You kind of you get blindsided. You get whatever you want to call them.
But we still talk about Thomas Paine.
We do. Not as many people though as you would think. But luckily, Common Sense is still held out there. It's not one of his greatest writings, but it was most important for America.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, so I've been somewhat possessed by the 18th century now, living in the oldest owner-occupied house in the city of York, built in 1761, doing research on the house, trying to decorate it. I went from an apartment at 23 South George Street with very sparse furnishings and living fairly sparsely as the Cadorus Creek Improvement Partnership president and then the Lower Susquehanna River keeper, to getting this house and having the bug for 18th century decor.
Or not? Why not? It's just like you have this opportunity. Why not?
Yeah. So it's my first floor is my little museum, and it's a good time. But it's an active museum. You can you come and visit me. We'll sit down at a 1820s chess table and play chess with period pieces and
that's really cool
and stuff like that, or just have some fun, cooking in the fireplace.
Okay, cool.
Something like that. So maybe that'll be our next interview.
A fireside chat, literally at the fireplace.
Fireside chat.
I love it. Other than that, that's a great kind of segue. It's like, what do you think we can learn from history? Kind of looking into now.
Some days it doesn't feel like we've learned, or sometimes it feels like we haven't learned anything.
No, but that's a really relevant point, though. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because there's pros and cons to that. I'm going to crack a little Goose Island open.
Goose Island. See, I told you I'm the slowest drinker around.
It's okay. I talk fast, I drink fast, but do whatever you want.
I have a beer. Yeah, that's one of the funny things I get. Some of my detractors sometimes, they're like, oh, he's out in the bars. I'm like, have you ever sat next to me and see how long it takes me to drink a beer?
In full disclosure, I've seen you out in the open. Of course, you're a man of the people. You're a public servant. But to me, you're a man of the people. You're out there, you're a public servant, but then you're just out enjoying your life. But you're not doing anything wrong, in my opinion. I've never seen you do anything. I'm just like, oh, that's Mayor Helfrich. Great. He's enjoying himself. He's talking to a few people. That's it.
Well, again, these are mostly political,
You try to spin.
It's mostly,
I get it.
It's mostly political spin. So,
hey,
everybody's trying to get in a little angle, and that's an unfortunate part of our political system. I wish the entire campaign process was to give the opponents 3 problems, lock them in a room for a day, have them come out and explain their solutions to those 3 problems. Period. End of campaign.
Yeah, and then you vote based on that campaign.
I will judge you based on your
how would you solve those
on
problems?
how you would solve these problems, and that's it. Just leave it at that. None of these games, none of these.
And that problem is critical thinking, not necessarily charades.
Right. Yeah. So that's, but utopia. You know,
In due time.
A place where people are actually voted in based on how they think and their work ethic,
Rather than how they look.
You know, how they look, what their bumper stickers say, what their flags say. Now that flags are a big deal.
It really is the case. I mean, it's interesting where I was very fascinated by politics at a very young age. I almost went into a completely political career. I had an uncle who was a lobbyist in Maryland. So just I always take a very interesting view on politics in general. But I feel like you're doing it the right way more than anything. You're a public servant. You're not a politician.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're a man of the people. You might have a D next to your name, but you don't have necessarily strictly D views.
Yeah.
It's what's relevant to the
Well,
community.
you want to get into that story?
I mean, we can go. Hey, I'm open book.
Well, I'm open. I told you that before the interview,
Which is perfect.
But to get back to my political career, you know, that's the one thing that I'm really proud of, and I warned people ahead of time that I am a social liberal and a fiscal conservative.
That's how I am personally.
When I talk to people, 80% of them say, that's how I am personally. Fiscally conservative. If you're going to take my money, you better have a darn good reason and a darn good plan of how you're going to use it.
Do it.
And if you're not hurting anybody else, you should be able to do what you want. Now, the definition of hurting other people varies. As I tried to explain to Arlen Specter one time,
It had to be a very interesting conversation.
a strict constitutionalist. I was trying to explain to him. It's funny. The first time I changed my appearance for politics was a meeting with Arlen Specter,
It's a branding point.
and I was like, it didn't matter. I really felt like, and maybe I was misjudging him. I don't know, but I really felt like I didn't want to have anything in between my logic and that man's ears.
Okay.
So I didn't want to come in. And at that time, my hair was about, can you see it? It was about as long as it is now, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
And so I cut my hair and got the suit. And I went in to talk to Arlen Specter to convince him that in a constitution that says the federal government is responsible for protecting us from enemies, both foreign and domestic, that people that pollute the water and the air and the earth to the point that our children are harmed by it are domestic enemies.
What did you say to that?
Didn't go over. Didn't get anywhere with it.
Well, I'm sure he had some food bar to say.
But no, he listened and didn't have much comment on it.
Just kinda like, oh.
Yeah.
Took the political route.
But I've never been, I was brought up a Democrat. When I saw the global policies of a Democratic administration that I thought were going to harm the country through the World Trade Organization, I was a World Trade Organization protester. You may have be familiar with what happened in Seattle.
Yes.
In the late 90s. However, I was a protester in Washington, D.C., that we blocked off the buildings so that the World Trade Organization could not meet. We stood up against the police arm in arm to the point that they were so frustrated they could do nothing. Excuse me. So at that time, seeing those policies that I saw were going to hurt the American worker in the long run, that were going to hurt American families, that globalization was going too far, that's when I left the Democratic Party. The Republicans were on board too. I found one person, Ralph Nader.
Shout out to Ralph Nader.
Shout out to Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader.
No, seriously though.
Ralph Nader was the only person running for president and one of the few people in general that spoke out against these policies that were making huge loans to oligarchs and leaders of small nations in exchange for taking their entire economy and distributing their economy, and then when the leaders failed or spent all their money on Mercedes or gold or whatever they did with the money,
blew it out. Yeah,
they blew it out, and then the people were held responsible. The people of the countries were held responsible.
Here's more taxes.
So the whole thing, and then the globalization and the effects of the American worker to export our jobs to places like China, to places like Bangladesh, to places that did not have equal labor laws, did not have equal environmental protections. What the heck did you think was going to happen? The next step...
We're cheating ourselves and we're cheating our fellow man at that point.
We're cheating the entire world because we had made some progress. We had made environmental progress. We had made 100 years of labor progress, even civil rights progress to some extent, because these were blue-collar jobs.
Correct. In terms of the actual labor laws.
helping African Americans and Latinos. You know, Caterpillar, Harley Davidson. They were known. AMF. They were known for places that were able to elevate people in the community and give them the higher-paying jobs. And what did we do? We opened the floodgates to places that were going to undercut us by paying $1 a day versus $20 an hour, that were going to put their pollution straight into the waterways and into the airways into the air without concern for their own people or other people.
It's a very black and white situation.
You know?
It's like it's going to be this or that.
But it was. I mean, unfortunately, and it was entirely predictable. And so yes, I went with the Green Party for a while. When I think right before I met with Specter, I became an independent because I didn't want anyone to be able to just say, you're doing that because you're a Democrat. You're doing that because you're a Green. You know, because I'm not any of it. Yeah, I've got opinions on each individual thing that doesn't allow me to get pigeonholed into any of their platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I myself, I don't normally divulge this on these podcasts because normally we don't get this political, which is fine. This is great, this forum. But I'm an independent. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I see views on both sides.
Well, and this gets back to the point. So when I decided to run for the mayor, for the position of mayor, I was very specific to people. And I knew it was going to be a hard challenge, an incumbent. And so I did tell people, you know, I know you're a Republican, but if you want to change, maybe you would consider changing your party.
Vote for me.
And vote for me. Maybe you're an independent. Well, you know, the independents don't get to vote in the primaries. Maybe
switch over.
You know, maybe
even if it's a short-term thing.
Yeah, because that is our right, and that's you had mentioned. Whoa.
Oh, you got some bottles underneath here. Don't mind us. They're from a previous episode.
I'm trying to think what you said exactly that made me think of it.
I said earlier, like, I'm not necessarily Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent, technically.
Yeah. But we have how do you go about things and the rules that you follow? I can't remember exactly what you said, but there are traditional ways of doing things.
Correct.
And then there are the rules.
So what do you follow?
Some people would want to tell you that if you're an independent, if you're a Democrat, you're always a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you're always a Republican. If you're an independent, you're always an independent. But in the city of York, when it comes to traditionally, the Democratic primary winner becomes the mayor, becomes the city council member, becomes the treasurer, you know, because that's when they pick their ones that are available. Mm-hmm. The Republicans are 20%. The independents are 20%. The Democrats are 60.
They're
So-
never going to win in essence.
Right. But if you want to have a voice, you look outside the box and say, how can I have a voice? And that's why I said, if you want to have a voice, step outside the box. Switch over, you know? Now, funny enough, it didn't work for me. I didn't win the Democratic primary.
I'd love to hear the story.
I didn't win the Democratic primary, but about a week to 10 days before the Democratic primary, my opponent, Mayor Bracey, sent out a letter to some Republican supporters. Nobody was running on the Republican ticket. She sent out a letter saying, "Hey, I know we haven't always been on the same side of everything, but I think I've done a good job for you, and so and I would like you to
I believe
hey,
it.
She was able to read. We'll talk about the math another time, but she did reduce taxes.
Fireside chat.
She did reduce taxes. I have some issues with how that happened. Again, fireside chat. But yeah, on paper, it looked pretty good from a conservative economic side.
Yeah,
What was going on?
This is what I've done as a Democratic mayor.
Yeah. And so she said, so please write me in. Well, one of my Republican friends called me up and said, "You'll never believe what I just got." And he showed me the letter, and I said, "Game on. New rules."
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah. Now, I know that some people on Facebook had already been saying, we're Republicans, we didn't switch, we're going to write you in. But I had no organized effort from my campaign.
To push that.
Zero
That
organized.
was grassroots.
Yeah. But as soon as that letter came in, game on. I jumped on Facebook, personally messaged about 250 of my friends that I knew were Republicans and city residents, and I ended up being the democratically registered Republican nominee
I love it.
for the mayor of York.
I love it. For all good purposes.
Well, that
In my opinion.
opinion too.
That's me being a little biased.
In my opinion too. So I went on, and again, my entire platform or my entire political philosophy remains fiscally responsible is what some people tried to get me to say, but I'm not afraid to say fiscally conservative. I don't want the government to be spending money, but I think the government does have to step in and fix inequities in the systems that the government created
Correct.
over centuries.
Yeah,
You know,
especially over the past couple decades.
It's our responsibility to fix the inequities that have been created by a white male power structure. Even today, while we have some folks in power that are more diverse, when you look at Congress or the legislatures of, I think, every single state, except for maybe Hawaii, because it's mostly Hawaiians.
Correct.
But almost every single state, it's still the white male majority that is writing the laws and passing the laws. So if we really want to address any of the problems that we have dealing with how folks of darker tone are treated, then it is still the white males who have to take the lead in making those changes.
To ultimately make them.
So what's that?
To ultimately make them.
To ultimately make them, yes, because they have the power to do that. It's also incumbent upon the voters to vote in a more diverse representation, which is pretty sad that our representation does not reflect very well the actual demographics of our country. But
It's something we champion over time.
yeah, and it is. That's why I'm here.
Which is fantastic.
This is what I'm doing. So then just to finish that out, I was talking about the primary. It's slightly anticlimactic. Oh, yeah, and so that was the second write-in. So twice by write-in have I been put in position to become an elected official. Two out of three campaigns were based on write-in votes.
which is crazy to me to think.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what
it's
level.
definitely
of government.
unprecedented.
The fact that he did that on an extremely local level, that like tight knit, is crazy.
Yeah. And I had Green Party members supporting me, and I had 912 Patriots supporting me and out canvassing at the same time. It was truly a coalition of folks, and I know that I feel like for a local politician, you're never going to be more popular than the day you got voted in.
It's funny that you say that. So I always say, I have a quote in the agency world: the day you sign clients, the day you lose them. In terms of popularity.
There you go. It's the same.
Yeah, it really is, though.
It is, because once you have to start making tough decisions, then you're going to start ticking people off. And,
truthfully, though.
Yep. And so, I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know we don't do polls. I don't know what my polling looks like. We don't do that local kind of thing. Maybe it's an idea. But I am sure that I have upset Democrats because I'm not Democratic enough.
Enough for them.
And I've upset Republicans that voted for me because I'm not Republican enough. But I continue to be the person I promised to be.
Well, I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day.
Socially liberal and fiscally conservative.
No, it's respectable. You're abiding by your values and your platform.
And I think there's also stuff that people don't understand. And I see we have limited time left, but I'm going to get into it.
No, yeah.
Because
feel free.
Politicians, and I'm going to use that word, politicians that are career politicians have to base their actions. They've all told me that I've got to base my actions on getting reelected if I want to keep getting things done for the people.
But that's not your mission.
But then there's right and wrong.
Correct.
So I am well aware that standing out at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement in York, something I did because I knew it was right, but also something I did to try to reduce the negative impact in the city of York, negative impacts that I was seeing occurring in other cities where they were sending out stormtroopers to suppress the people's voices. Mm-hmm. I saw it. I saw so much just watching in the days before the protests started here in York. So much I could relate to because I was a protester.
Well, I could say in hindsight, outside looking in objectively, in terms of protests, there's nothing malicious that has happened to date in the city of York.
Well, we had an incident that happened, which was more of a personal incident than an overall thing, and
but outside
that's an issue of its own. But I know that from some conservatives, from some police officers, they think that I have abandoned the police department.
Just because you went out there.
Not just because I went out there, but because I believe that reforms need to happen.
Well, they should, nationwide.
But there is something so much deeper that I feel that people are missing, and that is that if the people don't trust the police officers, those police officers' lives are in more danger.
Correct.
If the people do not trust the police officers, they don't report the people that are committing the crimes. That puts us all in greater danger, including the police officers.
I had a conversation with a small business owner in York, lives in York City, works in York City, barber. Shout out to Nate Fleming. We'll talk about today. He talks about police programs when he was a kid, where police would actually come to his school and they were like, "Hey, this is what we do from a York City police standpoint. Here's some stickers. This is what we do. If there's anything going on at home, if you would ever need us, this is how you respond." It was friendly. It was trying to be engaging. Yep. It's community driven. I think we need to get back to this having open communication and just open those lines of community.
And we've been trying to since I started. Both Chief Bankert and Commissioner Robinson have been trying to do more of that, trying to get the police officers more engaged with that. I think there's work that we still need to do on that, but I really don't understand. I guess I'm a person that faces problems and tries to figure out a solution.
Yeah.
I'm not a person that puts up walls and tries to protect things. I'm like, I tell people this. I tell the staff at the city, sometimes I'm not very good at giving praise. I'm not the best cheerleader in the world. My dad was military and my mom is German. When I look at things, I try to find the problems and figure out the solutions to the problems. If I've got a defensive line in front of me, I don't go pat on the back the 99 brigades that are doing well. I try and find the one place that the enemy is going to bust through and kill everybody.
Yeah.
Or destroy what everybody has been working towards. So I'm much more pointing out the problems. A lot of people aren't built for that.
No,
a lot of people want to maintain peace and will bend over backwards to just not, they will take punishment upon themselves or have their own lives impacted just by not confronting a problem. And I can't do that. I have to look at it and say, look, York has a history that we're still dealing with. 55 years ago, the mayor ran around in the neighborhoods and sicked a German Shepherd on little children of color, yelling epithets at them, yelling the N-word at them when they were 5 years old. Those folks are now 60.
They're still living.
They're 60
They're
years old.
active members of the community.
Some of them are friends of mine that have told me these things.
I believe it. I've heard the stories too.
And so there was no way that I was going to be the mayor during a time of civil rights protest and not let the people have their say, not let those people know that they were being listened to and that actions were going to come from it. The idea of putting 100 police or National Guard or armored tanks or anything that I've seen in some of these other cities or I'm hearing about coming from upper levels of government, it's insane. The people need to be heard. They need to feel like they're being heard, and then they need to see actions being taken. Respect. And that is what Commissioner Robinson and I provided to the people of York and those visiting York, and I think it was reciprocated in the lack of violence, the lack of damage, and the ongoing dialogues that people don't even know about
that are
going on between the district attorney. Let me throw him in there too. The district attorney, the police commissioner, the head of our group violence intervention unit. They've all been meeting with people that don't. They're not going to be nice about things. They want things done. Mm-hmm. And, it's not the time for niceties are over. No, here are our problems. Here are the demands.
Some stuff done for the
let's
greater
get
good.
it done. Let's get it done.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I'm glad I got a minute to throw that in there because I know I've done things that are going to make me less popular than I was 2 years and almost 3 years ago.
The right things.
Well, that's what I've got to live with. So I'm good on that.
That's the way I view it.
I'm good on that.
If you're doing the right things, at that point, it's like let the public perception perceive it at that point.
Yeah. So I'm looking at a minute and a half over there. What else you got for me? You better hit me
Any
quick.
last shout-outs you want to give?
Last shout-outs. Well, just to everybody at the staff, everybody that works with me and helps me and recognizes my weaknesses and tries to build me up where I am weak. And particularly I'm talking about the directors and everybody, the 360 employees at the city of York. And those that also can take my frustration, and I'm not always the easiest to get along with because I have a lot of expectations.
That's okay though.
So I just want to thank everybody at the city of York and thank the residents of the city. There are so many good people in York. And the people of the city of York should never be judged by the 0.2% that are creating chaos in our community. I think our city is judged unfairly by some of our neighbors, and it's just another symptom. And they should really think about the good people here in the city of York.
I'll wrap that up. Haven't recently moved. I mean, I've always been a York County native since growing up. Lived on the southern end, grew up on the southern end. Past 2.5 years, I lived in technically York City, northern end though, but I've always frequented down here. It's very community driven. I come down here and people know your name as you get to know them. It's a strong camaraderie in York City, regardless of where you're from. And to me, this kudos to impartially what you're doing and in general what people are doing from public sector, private sector. It's amazing. So on that note, Mayor Mike Helfrich, absolute pleasure to have you on Schiffbauer Over Rocks. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for the opportunity.